basically I had made the offer to answer any questions that anybody had about CRV, the different forms of remote viewing, the military history, as well as I can legally answer those. Okay, the question is, out of all the applications for CRV, which is the most difficult to learn? In my opinion, the most difficult application for CRV is the highly technical. This is not to be confused with what is called technical remote viewing, okay? Which has nothing to do with technical at all. But when your target is, let's say, the construction of a new machine that is being built in some foreign country, some new weapon, and what the tasker, what the customer wants is total internal diagrams of all the working pieces, that's where it gets hard.
Physical location.
That's right. And the technical diagrams, I'm not good at it in remote viewing. Now, in real life, that's my forte, and dealing with people is not.
Yeah.
In remote viewing, dealing with people is like, falling forward, and dealing with the technical is just very difficult. My subconscious has a totally different personality than I do. But I would say that is the hardest for me, at least. Now, for some people, it's not. You take Mel. Mel draws you a picture. You can take it to the bank. Before I got there, this is a story, and everybody has confirmed it for me. I wasn't there to see it. The buildings at Fort Meade were condemned at the end of World War II. And all this thing about $20 million for this project and all that, over 25 years of time, about 18 million of that went out to SRI, and they had all the computers and the air conditioning and everything. We were sitting in condemned buildings, no air conditioning, no nothing. I went down to property disposal to get our desks and chairs, things like that. I mean, we were the bastard children of the entire intelligence community, and we had nothing. And so anyway, we were sitting in these condemned buildings, and summertime in DC is just horrible. I mean, DC's built on a swamp anyway, and it's just totally unlivable. Well, generally, the way these buildings were situated, generally, the wind goes across. We could open the windows. They were long buildings. We could open the windows and get a breeze through there. One day, the wind was going along the building. No breeze. Nobody could breathe or anything. So they decided, okay, the door on the end, we'll just kick open and get some breeze in, and then call the post engineers to come fix it. Well, somebody said, duh, they don't fix condemned buildings, And so Joe was there that day, and so Joe said, well, wait a minute, let me try something. He went over to the other building where we had a fan, and sat down and did a session and came out with a drawing of a key. Went downtown, had a key made off of that drawing, came back, put it in the lock, turned it, and opened the door, CRV can take you to that capability. This, by the way, let me put a plug here.
That could be a very useful thing.
Oh, yeah.
Being able to make keys.
Yeah. Let me put in a plug here for CRV. You'll find everybody saying, oh, my form of remote viewing is just as good as CRV. And you'll see them drawing sketches, and it's a rough sketch of the target. And then you'll see CRV, and here's this rough sketch of the target, just like in Joe's book, okay? At that level, CRV is no better than anything else. But CRV provides a way to go beyond that level, and there's no other discipline out there that does. And this is one of the reasons I'm sold on CRV. 90% of the sessions I do are right at the level you see in Joe's book and, you know, other things that you see put up on a screen somewhere saying, isn't this great? But that 10%, none of the other disciplines can take you into that 10%. CRV can. And that's why I'm sold on CRV. And very adamantly sold on CRV. Let me make another point here about CRV and natural psychics. Basically, there are three kinds of people who don't make good CRVers. One is the person who feels that anything to do with psychic is of the devil and you'll go to hell for it. Those people weed themselves out. We never see them. The second kind of person who doesn't make a good CRVer is the total zealot who lives, breathes, eats, and sleeps psychic phenomena. They have no discernment. They're so ready to believe they'll believe anything. Well, shoot, half of the CRV process is weeding out your imagination and all that. And they're too ready to believe. They'll never weed out that stuff, and so they can't do it. The third kind is the natural psychic who's really good. They have built their comfortable chair. And when you take them and say, okay, we're going to do this with these columns, and, you know, stage 1, you're going to work only the ideogram, not the target, and stage 2, then you're going to work only certain aspects of the target and develop them, and so on. The natural psychic says, why? You know, one natural psychic that came and took the course told me at the end, his critique was that learning CRV is like joining the Marines to learn how to fold your shorts. He said, it's not worth it. And yet, he came back later and he said, you know, I've taken from CRV those things which will get me organized and disciplined, and I've become a better psychic. And this happens constantly. We get natural psychics in who develop their skills and become great psychics because they've taken from CRV what they needed. However, they don't do all the little columns. And so when it comes to an analyst doing it, they're great psychics, but they're not good CRVers. And this whole thing was built in the military to be uniform, to be highly regimented, highly organized, so that if you train an analyst to analyze one viewer's session, he can automatically analyze any viewer's session. And he hits a natural psychic session, and you know, there's a reason why analyst includes the word anal. And he looks at it and just, you know, looks at it and is just totally confused. And so that third type, when they come and they take CRV training, they become much, much better psychics. I mean, sometimes just the difference between daylight and dark. But they'll never make a good CRVer. Now, does that mean it's worth it? Shoot, yeah. Somebody becomes a great psychic, you bet I can use them. I don't care if they don't stay in structure. If they can find the kid, who cares whether they get the right columns? Your question was, are there any units currently going? Like I say, once you leave them, they don't tell you things anymore, and so I honestly don't know. I hope so. It would be totally stupid of the government to throw away such an extremely valuable intelligence tool. By valuable, I mean that a study was done once. Spy in the sky satellite, agent on the ground, and all that. The remote viewing unit had the highest accuracy rate of all forms of intelligence gathering. And that could not have been lost on everyone. And so I think it would be totally stupid of the government to just divorce themselves from this. The question that keeps coming up in my mind is, would our government do anything stupid? And I'm afraid the answer may be yes. They probably would. And if so, then what's going to happen is this will get out in the civilian community, will become a really strong tool, and at some point, some general or something will say, this is a good tool, we've got to have it. Let's form a board of researchers and start funding their research, and the whole thing will start all over again from scratch with no benefit of anything they've ever done, and they'll try to reinvent the wheel, and 20 years down the line, the military may get to the point where they should have been 20 years ago. Our government does do stupid things. So as to whether there are other units currently going, I don't know. I just hope so. Okay, the question is telepathic overlay. Does one viewer's findings influence another viewer's findings? One thing we learned very early on is that you keep the viewers from knowing anything about the target, including who else is working on it. For example, you're a viewer, okay? You're a fledgling viewer, you've been at this for 6 months, a year, or something like that, and I come to you and I say, this is a really important target. This is so important that I'm only using you and Joe McMonagle. And so do the session. Now, Joe is very upfront and very public about the fact that 50% of the sessions he does are total garbage. I mean, he never even accesses the site. And he's very upfront about that. And I work the database. I know it's true. Half the sessions Joe does, he won't have access to the site. And so it'll be a wasted session. However, I've just told you that Joe is going to do this session, and you have great respect for Joe. Guess what you're going to find? You're going to find what Joe finds. Well, what if it's part of the 50% when he's off target? You're going to be off target equally. So yeah, telepathic overlay is a very real danger to viewers, and for that reason, you never tell a viewer who else is working the target. Now, you would think that the subconscious mind could then say, well, who else is working this target? And it would know, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Generally, if you don't tell one viewer who else is working the target, you've rid yourself of 90% of the telepathic overlay.
How does that affect in a classroom?
How does that affect a classroom setting?
Yeah.
In a classroom setting, you have, let's say, 5 people, and you want them all to work a target at the same time.
Right.
Give them 5 different targets, each viewer a different target. If you give one target and have an entire class work it, I guarantee you, you've just set that class up for all kinds of mental and emotional problems. Because even if they access the right site at the time another one does, the telepathic overlay is there, and one person's interpretation of the site will bleed over. Also, one person's emotional reaction to the site will bleed over. And so as a trainer, I would never give 2 viewers the same target at the same time. You're just asking for trouble. I think it sabotages the viewers in the long run. And so I know that other teachers will take one target and give it to the entire group. In fact, that was done here at the conference a couple of times. Bad mistake. Just don't ever do that. Because telepathic overlay is like opening the door to your house, the back door to your house, but there it is, and people walk in. They don't just get what's in your living room, they get what's in your medicine cabinet, what's under the beds and everything else. I mean, they have access to it. And so when you run a bunch of viewers on the same target at the same time, you're asking for trouble for everybody. It's just too much bleed over. The question is, in the unit, were the viewers actually reading the mind of the monitor? You bet. That happens a lot. And this old thing about you've got to go double blind, that's a good idea. But it doesn't solve the problem, because then you read the mind of the tasker, you know, and it don't matter. One of the main reasons for keeping the double blind situation, which I'm for, by the way, is that if the monitor knows what the target is, they will react, even on a subliminal basis, to what the viewer is saying. Now, keeping a monitor in a double-blind situation doesn't really help all that much, because you've got the monitor sitting there with monitor's AOL. You've got a blind monitor who doesn't know what the target is, and the viewer says red, round, rubbery, and the monitor thinks, ooh, this is a ball game. From that point on, the monitor will still react to whatever he thinks the target is, if nothing else, with just putting pheromones out into the air. And from that point on, as soon as the monitor has his AOL or her AOL, you no longer have a double-blind situation. You simply have a situation which is single-blind, but the monitor is almost guaranteed to be on the wrong target, and so will lead the viewer in a different way. The ideal situation would be to have no monitor at all, but the monitor is there to help and is beneficial in so many ways that it's worth it to have the monitor. Ideally, a trained, experienced monitor can sit there without polluting the session, but boy, is it hard. The minute the monitor gets the AOL, then you're not double blind, you're just single blind on the wrong target. So the question is there a monitor cool down and purification process? I've never seen a monitor go through it. There should be, yes. There should be, but I have never seen someone who is going to monitor go through a cool down period. I think it should be required that every monitor sit down and talk to themselves and say, look, I don't know what this target is, and I've got certain rules to monitor by, and if I start building castles, I will stop myself, or I will leave the room, or whatever. I've never seen a monitor do that. Telepathic overlay is a very bad problem. However, you've got to realize that what makes it even worse is that telepathic overlay, you may go out mentally and find that other person, but what you get back is your AOL about what that other person is thinking. And so you've got a double whammy going. The telepathic overlay and then your interpretation of the information you get telepathically is just, it's a real problem. Analytics is stage 8, generally accepted as stage 8. And it's something that Ingo has not released to the public, and so I can say it's there. See, the Ingo Swann structure was never classified. Anybody who tells you, oh yes, I'm teaching the classified military thing, that's a tip-off. They don't know what they're talking about, because it was never classified. It was proprietary to Ingo Swann, but it was never classified, even at the confidential level. But Ingo owns it. And Ingo has basically just said, teach through stage 6. Stage 7 was, as far as I know, never really nailed down. And so I think Paul and I both teach stage 7. I don't know there's a name for it. Ed tries to teach stage 7, but Ed developed his own stage 7 and tried to make it phonetics. And so Ed will have the viewer sit there and go like this and try to see what letters form. And somebody walks by the room right at that time. It's really hard to explain, you know. But stage 7, as we understand it, just sort of happens. One way to identify that I tell my students to identify stage 7. Well, that's how I tell the students to recognize it. What I tell my students to recognize as stage 7 is information that seems like you didn't get it, it just came to you. One of the indicators of this is that you will tend to go over and say AOL and write out your AOL, but you just almost feel compelled to write quote marks around it because you're quoting what who knows who just told you. Yeah. And this is a way to, one of the ways to identify a stage 7. It's never been really definitely defined, and so the rule for stage 7 is, you know, it happens. The question was, is alphanumerics accepted in ERV? And the answer is sure. Let me suggest that at some point you'll find that to be very cumbersome. Yes. If you judge the value of each perception by the information that came before it, then what you're doing is you're dragging your whole session along with you, and that's very hard. There is a, if however, you judge the value of each perception on its own, then you have to judge between AOL signal, and tangible column by the level of certainty you have. I generally do not put a noun in the thing column until there's that aha, absolute certainty. Yeah. Generally, I'll put them over in the AOL signal column. And with alphanumerics, it's the same thing. So you treat it as you would any other noun, and you're absolutely certain that it's wrong, but you still got it, AOL column. You're pretty certain that it's right and you got it, AOL signal. Okay. By damn, there's an M here. Yeah. Tangible. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. The question is, which of the RVs would be best for bulk mineral exploration? I would say, depending on what you're trying to do, either CRV, to which I am admittedly prejudiced, or none of them. If what you're trying to find is the minerals, I would dump the whole RV field and go get a good dowser, a proven dowser. Generally, they can do a whole lot more than anybody who sits down and does quote RV. Because like an RV, in the many forms of RV, it's like you blindfold somebody, parachute them out of a plane, and when they hit the ground, then they take off the blindfold. And you say, okay, where are you? And they'll say, well, I'm left of this tree, and I'm right of this house, and there's a hill in front of me. And you say, yeah, but give me your coordinates. Where are you? Oh, well, I don't know. I'm standing here in a field. And it's the same way with the remote viewings, that when you get a person to the target, they can describe the target, but they can't give you the coordinates. And therefore, when you're trying to find the exact X on the map, I'd go get a dowser. When there was a lull in military activity around the world, we did practice targets. When some hotspot came up or some impending disaster type thing came up, then we got lots of tasking. When there were hostages, we did lots of real world tasking. And then there would be lull times where we would just, drag out the old pictures from the National Geographics and practice. Some of the directors that we had tried to make a distinction between the National Geographic, the practice pictures, and the real pictures. The attitude that most of the viewers had was that the practice pictures were harder. Now, the directors we had, who were also not viewers and quite often didn't know all that much about viewing, always felt that when we were in a time of doing practice targets, we were all going to slough off and not do our work and not do a good job and all that. And on the viewer's part, it always seemed to us like, uh-oh, this is a practice target, I'd better get to work because they're so much harder because they don't have the importance. One of the things about controlled remote viewing that really sets it apart from almost all of the other disciplines of parapsychology is that in a laboratory situation or in a real world situation, or when the cameras are zeroed in on you and you're really on the spot to do well, you do better.
Yeah.
And in all of the other disciplines, all of a sudden here's the camera in the lab and everything else, and it just goes to pot. It's not that way with CRV. You can, well, this happened, be in a slump for a solid month. I mean, just dog meat sessions. I mean, just pig slop, and on practice targets. And then one day have to go downtown and do your dog and pony show in front of some Senate subcommittee or something. And they'll bring a target so that there's no way you could have cheated or anything else. And just a fantastic target. I mean, the kind you would like to put in your scrapbook to show your grandkids. And then, the funding is renewed for the following year and everybody gets to keep their jobs and all that. And then you go back to the office and finish out another month of just dog meat sessions, and you're in your slump again. But one of the, it has to do with the theory behind remote viewing. In remote viewing, you're basically working two people. You're working the subconscious person and the conscious person. Well, the subconscious person is a genius child, lightning fast, infinitely smart, but still a child, gets bored and so forth. And when you get a remote viewer who's trained and experienced into a situation where somebody's life depends on it, where your own future depends on it or something like that, what happens is the subconscious says, hey, I can do this. And all of a sudden it's interested and it comes to the rescue. And then you go back and you have a practice session and it says, yeah, go ahead, do that, I don't care. And you're stuck with your AOLs, with your imagination and everything else, and your subconscious is not cooperating because it just doesn't want to do it. So, so here again is one of those situations where a viewer comes up to a practice target and says, uh-oh, I'd better get to work because this is going to be hard. But you go into a real life situation where, the lives of a whole battalion of troops depends on it or something, hey, easy session, very easy.